Alright, so back to this, or shouldn't really say back to this, but obviously revisiting a topic or show I've covered many times, Miraculous Ladybug, right? And again, this video is gonna kind of be the start of something interesting. I don't know how much I'm going to commit, but post season 5, post movie, post, what would you call it? Post Paris special, right? Again, this show's been on my mind recently, and through, as you can see on the MLB playlist, which probably is nearly 100 videos at this point, I've covered many things, right? As well as many sort of concepts, topics, ideas, right? And a lot of those included things that I would have done differently, right? But most of those were in reference or relation to specific things, right? For the show, or just more general, broad aspects of the show, but never, the show itself, and kind of not really, I guess, taking the time to step back and be like, all right, not if it were this episode, this season, this character, right? Not what would I do if it were this thing that I could change, but, and what this video may or may not be the start of, is what I would do if I could change the entire show itself and what that would look like. And by entire show, I don't necessarily mean, again, like I mentioned before, like just an episode, a season, a character, subtopic aspect. I mean like the whole thing itself. And that's kind of what I'm going to try to do now that, again, we're at this point. Because once season 6 picks up, I'm just going to make my videos on that. But now that we're at an appropriate point kind of after all of this MLB content, it questioned me, and I thought about it. It's like, all right, if I could just and change the show, right? What would that look like? So I have a piece of paper here. That was loud as shit. A piece of paper here that I've kind of gotten started writing on. Again, with the big thing kind of, it's not complete and it's not filled out, and I still don't know how far I'm going to take this concept and or potential series of rewriting the whole show. But again, it's something where I've got, the start of it down. So I just kind of wanted to go through that in this video and potentially see where I could bring it from there, right? So a few baseline, or I guess ground rules, or kind of foundations, background for this, right? Again, the first things first is, as for the overall concept of the show, basically what the show itself is, that obviously need to keep, right? I can't say, all right, I'm going to rewrite Miraculous and turn it into something that's completely fucking different, right? The overall show and kind of how it looks is going to remain the same. Just everything or anything else more specific is up for grabs or up for change, right? With the big thing being, again, so the overall show itself keep, but any other topics which I have written down, I'm going to go through, right? And again, there are 2 main topics I'm going to go in this video, but there are more that for potential future videos I may go through. But for these topics, right, probably the first and most important one is the Miraculous and the Kwamis. What distinguishes the Earth and world in the show from our Earth and world in real life is the existence of, these jewels and these creatures that represent certain, I guess, elements or ideas that bring power and abilities to the holder, right? That's all that separates this show from our reality, right? At least with that Earth and world. That's the first thing. So the first topic I'm going to address, which I will in this video, as well as, again, the Kwamis, right? So that's the main thing, right? Then we have the next biggest one, characters and motives. Probably one of the biggest flaws of, I'd say, the show, the actual show itself, and where I feel it was kind of lacking. That's, again, going to be one that's big up for change. as well as just the overall story and plot and how that'll look based off the character and motive. So those are the three that I'm only going to go through the Miraculous and then the characters in this video, right? Because story and plot I'll need to figure out based off of those. But again, it's something to where that'll be kind of the next thing and how it'll look based off that, right? And then as for the overall story and plot, kind of the next thing, and this is where we start to get into kind of specifics where, because once I get over, I'm going to cover Miraculous and characters in this video, right? The story and plot will have to be its own separate video. But once we get past that, then that's when I'm actually getting into like writing basically a new show, right? With, again, the next topic being a timeline or series or sequence of events, right? That's when we actually look at, all right, you know, what is happening based off of the changes we made to the Miraculous characters, their motives, as well as the story and plot we've derived based from that. What specifically is happening and what are we kind of seeing there? And with it kind of wrapping up with show progression, like what do the seasons look like? What is the end game, end goal? Again, stuff like that, season finales. So those two, I doubt I'll cover anytime soon. Timeline events, show and progression, because that would really be like basically me like opening up a Google Docs and kind of like actually putting pen to paper and making like basically episodes, right? Again, you know, granted, obviously I have a decent base to go off of, but that would basically be what those would entail. So in this one, again, like I mentioned before, we're only going over Miraculous and characters. I'll probably make a separate story and plot video, and then that's when I'll need to decide, all right, am I going to commit to basically rewriting the entire show? Because if I do, I'm not going to just fucking bullshit it. I'm going to actually like probably make episodes like, I'd probably cut it down like to like, let's say 3 seasons of 12 just to make it, I wouldn't do like the 100. Like honestly, if I were to do, I'd probably break it down into 3 seasons of 12, make it a trilogy. But again, we'll see, right? So that's just, again, this will be if I have no idea if I'm continuing on with this. I'm just making this video because I had the idea and I got the changes that I'm going to make to the Miraculous as well as characters. And again, you know, because the changes, to be fair, there's only one big change that I'm going to make based on the Miraculous and characters, right? Like, and by big change, I mean it would affect the whole show. But, you know, looking at those are the easiest ones, right? Story and plot will be the next one, and that one will be a bit more difficult because that one will involve me, all right, how are these changes going to impact the story and plot and what we see there? But again, with that, right, I guess let's just get into it. So 2 changes. So the Miraculous, right, we'll go over first changes I made to those, since that's, again, what allows this universe to exist separate from our own, and then just the characters themselves. Because I'm not making an entirely new cast of characters, but there are changes that I want to make, as well as to the Miraculous as well. So with that, let's begin. The very first bullet point I have under Miraculous is no time-based Miraculous. So that means no rabbit or snake. I have no idea why they introduced time as a concept, because we saw kind of what happened or where the show went after that, right? It's just, you know, no time, no like alternate or parallel universes, stuff like that. So, I mean, to be fair, as much as I love the Paris special, the concept of alternate, like, again, it's like, keep all that shit out. We don't need that. That just overly complicates and convolutes everything, at least when it comes to the main sort of storyline of the show, right? Story and plot line. Again, that's just, that will be for any supplementary, you know, like content. So that's the first thing that I would change, right? And it's an easy change. The second, and this is more just a reaffirming, right, is just keep the main Miraculous. And what I mean by that is the Ladybug, Cat, and then the Butterfly Miraculous. Those 3 are going to be the center of attention. I don't see a need to change those. Again, regarding, you know, the Butterfly Miraculous is the perfect Miraculous for, like, the villain figure. I mean, to be able to take advantage of people's negative emotion is, I mean, again, as well as, you know, maintain secrecy, right? by, again, kind of delegating the fighting to, your minion, like those people. Like, I feel like it's perfect. Like, there's no need to change that. As well as, again, the Ladybug kind of being the natural counter, and being able to purify those, right? As well as, like, again, I feel like no brainer, no need to change that. Even the cat Miraculous, like, because again, it goes with the whole theme of creation and destruction, right? As well as the merging of two, granting the wish. So no need to change that as well, right? Like, but so the whole thing with that, right, being that, as for those being kind of those three being the center of everything, I feel like is kind of, it makes sense. Like, there's no need to change that, and I don't even think I would. Like, well, I wouldn't, just because there's zero reason to. It works, so keep it, right? Don't change it. Don't fix something that ain't broke. So that's the first thing, right? But what I would do, going based off that, is limit the supporting Miraculous. And what I'm referring to is, like, basically the Season 2 Miraculous. The fox, the turtle, the bee, and then the peacock. I don't see a reason to change those. I mean, I may or may not include other Miraculous, like, at all. Like, it's quite possible that the 7 that we see, in Season 2, right? Ladybug, cat, butterfly, peacock, fox, turtle, bee. Those may be the only 7 in this new rewrite. I don't really see a reason to include any other ones, right? I mean, let's put it this way. The peacock as sort of supplementary supporting the butterfly, which eventually gets fixed and then utilized in Season 4. Like, we saw what Gabriel could do with those 2 alone, right? He's powerful enough with those 2 alone to where there would be no reason to give him any R's on the villain side. For the hero side, there's, again, same deal. There's no reason to expand beyond those 5, simply because, A, we see that, and the expansion kind of diminishes the meaning of the current, I'd say, of those, the expansion of kind of the heroes cast with other Miraculous and other people, which is one of the bigger issues of the show, kind of diminishes the ones we see. So not only for characters, but for Miraculous themselves, like, the cat one basically becomes nearly obsolete, right? And it's also something there to where it's like, because along with that, the characters themselves, right? So by limiting the supporting ones, right, not only are we giving more development to the ones we see, but also the more development to those characters as well, right? With the big thing being, so keep in those main ones, right? The main 3 as the center of attention, but just limit those supporting ones, because that way you can give them more development for those Miraculous themselves, as well as the characters that wield them, right? Versus, like, I mean, Alia, she got development, but I guess she no longer, like, it's weird where it's like those 3 changed hand, like, it would make more sense for those to just remain in the hands of the people that we've seen wield them. But again, besides that, in kind of moving on, one thing in another big missed opportunity is expanding on supplementary enhancements and abilities for the Miraculous, right? Which could be the way to, I guess, sort of, if kind of limiting those Miraculous makes the show feel stale, you can expand on those, like what we've seen, with other abilities and enhancements for, again, the Miraculous themselves, right? Like, we only see Ladybug and Cat Noir use their powers, but even so, it's not that much. Like, we don't see Hawkmoth or pretty much anybody else use them. But I think it's more interesting in terms of not, because we see their enhancements and abilities as mostly environmental based, like just kind of whether it be water, ice, space, fire maybe, like, again, it's mostly to adapt to the environment. But what they could do, is kind of, it sounds crazy, but delegate some of the abilities that the other Miraculous hold to those Miraculous and kind of portray it as like a spin-off, of that, right? Again, or sort of, what would you call it? Portray it as kind of a, what's the term? An extension of whatever ability, whether it be creation, destruction, and then that would be a good way to sort of counteract, again, Hawkmoth, or, just the Butterfly Miraculous, and kind of be in that position to force, again, the merging of the butterfly and the peacock, as well as sort of a response to their, growing power and abilities, right? Or growing power via their abilities and enhancements. And again, kind of, taking down more and more Akumatai's victims with ease. But so the big thing is potentially some of those other abilities you can delegate down to just those main ones, right? I would need to literally make a flow chart for this. I don't have that set up at the moment. But again, this is more so just an overall conceptual video. If I really do commit to this, I would make separate videos for each of these topics. And I would go much, much more in depth. So that's just what I'm thinking overall though, right? And then probably the last thing is the Paris World Special introduced to us the idea and concept of the Miraculous draining your energy. We don't see that at all in the original universe. I guess trade-off is after a certain amount of time, you just de-transform if you're not an adult. The only kind of time we see the Miraculous take a toll or effect on the user is A, when Natalie uses the damaged peacock one, and B, when again Hawkmoth or Gabriel gets cataclysmed, right? So with those, and kind of I guess the main thing here being that's I see that as something that runs concurrent in parallel to, let's say, the time you can use the Miraculous, right? I think, again, for both, the heroes and the villains, either whether it be the user or the Kwami, I think that would be kind of what puts the, because otherwise we want to avoid kind of this stalemate in what we've seen in the show to where, all right, what prevents Hawkmoth or Gabriel from just sending out Akumatai's victim after Akumatai's victim and, just waiting until one of them wins? That's one of the big things, right, that I think can be used to, again, kind of try to force his hand there, right, or the villain in this. Again, it's something to where, and I do think it creates that interesting concept and potential on both the side of the heroes as well as the villains of, again, how do I balance it, again, as well as ties into the concept of the Miraculous is only limited by its user, which I think is something that, again, is also kind of a no-brainer keep. It's something to where we don't really see that, at least until season 5 where crazy shit happens, we don't see them used to really their full potential. So I think the concept of it, and sort of like an explanation or limiting factor to what can be done and used would be, again, that energy drain, right? Granted, it doesn't need to be all right, it literally fucking drains your life force. It just needs to have an impact. And I feel it would work hand in hand with that. Versus just the old, all right, have to de-transform because I'm a kid and it's limited. Which is, again, to be fair, the whole reason they wrote in the Paris special was that it de-transforms is it's mostly due to the Kwamis, limiting again, the damage on their user. But I think this is also an interesting thing that can be worked in tandem. But with that, I think that's pretty much, at least for now, the only real change I made to the Miraculous. I think the Kwamis are fine. I wouldn't get rid of the Kwamis. I think separate beings that kind of power the Miraculous and, almost, I don't want to say fuse, but empower the user with that. With them kind of being the energy source and the Miraculous itself being the focus, right? I feel no reason to change it. If anything, maybe, I don't want to say change their personalities, but it's something to where, I guess, they're kind of maybe be an explanation for, the in-universe explanation is that if they use their power, it just destroys everything. But I think there should be more of I guess, I don't want to say tangible, but, I guess the big thing there is there should be, I think, more depth to that. And I think a good way to do it is to kind of change their personality. Make the Miraculous, the Kwamis wiser. You'd think for beings that live for, millions, if not billions of years, and have had however many generations of owners, that they'd be, wiser and have more to impart, but we don't really see that. So, but I think that would be kind of a good way to sort of supplement that. Is all right, kind of change their personalities, but other than that, I feel with the way they are in the show, it works out perfectly. So even for both the side of the heroes and the villains, I wish we got more conversations between Gabriel and Nuru, if I'm being honest. But again, moving on. That's all I'd keep for that. So with that, let's move on to the characters. And this is the only other topic I'm going to cover in this video. If I do a story and plot video, I'd go into that. And then what I'd probably do is revisit these 3 topics before I get into like timeline and events and show progression. Because then I'd basically be writing individual episodes at that point. But again, with that, right, there's that. So, characters. First things first, for as much as I don't like her character, I think we keep Marinette, or at the very least, the Bridget who we saw in the PV. I think the idea or concept of a supposed, like, ordinary girl, even though she's not really, like, at least the idea of just an ordinary person wielding the Ladybug Miraculous, right? Particularly kind of being the one that's in direct conflict or sort of, the direct opposition to the Butterfly one. I think that makes sense. And again, it's kind of a no-brainer. No reason to like change that or, potentially mess that up, right? I don't see a reason. As for, again, Adrian, though, I think we replaced him with PV Felix. So I guess, and the reason why I say keep Marinette in PV Bridget, but replace Adrian with PV Felix, because Bridget in the PV isn't that different from Marinette, right? There are some slight character differences, that I'm pretty sure I have a video on Bridget and Marinette, right, in their character comparison at some point in the list, the MLB playlist. But, again, Adrian in PV Felix, not Show Felix, but PV Felix, even like Show Felix and PV Felix are completely different. And I feel like, for as much as I like Adrian's character and dislike Marinette's, I feel like we kind of need to keep Marinette and Bridget, but Adrian needs to be replaced with Felix. And the reason being is that I feel like Adrian's character doesn't really work with the Cat Miraculous, right? I feel like Adrian's character would work out really well with the Ladybug one, right? And kind of what that means or represents, and kind of him being a good, like a force of good, right? Someone who, despite his shitty situation, is optimistic. But I feel like having kind of an ordinary person occupy that role makes more sense. Because, again, with the big thing being, I can see both of them filling that role, but I feel like it's something to where having the ordinary one be the one in direct opposition to the villain makes more sense than kind of, all right, the one who again, is extremely well off, but still has kind of a troubled life, but keeps, again, his head up and is still a good person there, right? Having that. And why I think PV Felix solved this issue is he doesn't really act, rather than act, as a force for good, or what we see in terms of, all right, Adrian, that's my ACA unit, ignore that. What we see in terms of Adrian, keeping his head up despite his kind of shitty situation and even his affluent, but also kind of I guess disassociative or kind of a lonely upbringing. I think Felix being in the occupier of the Cat Miraculous, being a more kind of morally gray individual, again, he's a much more kind of serious, like someone who you would see more as the villain, but kind of being a more morally gray, kind of doing what he views as, I guess, his duty or due diligence, being chosen, again, for that, right? Rather than just someone trying to do good, and or, again, keeping his head up despite the situation. I feel like that's the solution. We keep Marinette, probably replace her with PV Bridget as this ordinary girl, again, up and, posing this force of evil, right? And replacing this, morally good, kind of keep his head up, albeit however, disconnected, sort of supplementary hero or user of that Cat Miraculous, right? Instead it's this more morally gray, more kind of like troubled, someone who I feel like, but still, at the end of the day, using that as an opportunity to kind of get out of his home, right? Lack of, so to say, or for lack of better term, for the part of Felix. And that's also something to where that could kind of explain. I feel like that also impacts the love square more as well, simply because it makes more sense that, Felix wouldn't pay attention to someone like Bridget in real life versus Ladybug, compared to, like, let's say the show where, Adrian and Marinette end up together anyway. But I just feel like at the end of the day, I don't want to say Marinette and Adrian are too similar, because they are different, right? Particularly in their upbringing. But again, I feel like they're too similar regarding their attitudes and their like mentalities, right? But I feel like because of that, a big thing we can do is, again, and a big thing that I think would be better, right, is to, again, change that, at least on the side of, one of the two. Again, to create more of a, what's the term? Again, just to create more of a dynamic between them, right? Or create more of a sort of difference, like distinguishing, I don't want to say it because they're already distinguished, but create more of like a difference in their character, right? And I feel like, again, there's just a very easy way to do that, and it's bring PV Felix back. So I feel like I've said enough to kind of justify that. Basically, yeah, let's just say PV Bridget, PV Felix, I feel like would be better fits for the main two heroes and characters, right, than show Marinette, show Adrian. For as much as I like the show, I guess, or well, not as I like the show, but for as much as we've gotten out of those two in the show, I just feel like naturally Bridget and Felix would be better protagonists. So that's what we're sticking with, that's what we're rolling with. Now, this is going to be the crazy, kind of the big change that I'm going to make, right? I feel like we need to completely rewrite Hawkmoth. And completely rewrite him to where he's not Gabriel Grest. And what I mean by this is, I'm going to be honest, I just think there is too much going on in the Agrest household. Even if, let's say, we change Adrian's character to Felix. I just feel like there's too much going on there with there being literally two of the three main Miraculous users under the same household. And especially because I feel like it's something to where then if by making Hawkmoth not Gabriel, you can focus more on rather than sort of the superhero aspect of Adrian's Cat Noir and Gabriel's Hawkmoth's relationship, it's more so about Felix in kind of his relation to his father. Like, that's kind of the bigger focus rather than, again, the entire, rather than them in their, what would you call it, like sort of superpowered states, right? I just feel like it's something to where Gabriel can't be Hawkmoth. Gabriel can still exist as Felix's father, or potentially I can see Felix being an orphan or like an only child, right, to his like family's heir, or like, what would you call it, his family's like fortune. Honestly, that's not the worst idea either. At the very least, Gabriel can't be Hawkmoth or Felix is, orphaned, right? One of the two. It's got to be one of the two. Maybe Natalie's the one raising him here, but again, who knows? At the very least, Gabriel can't be Hawkmoth. That's all I'm going to say. I just feel like, again, there's too much going on there, right? Similar to with Marinette and Adrian being too similar of characters, I just think the issue here is that there's too much with there being two of the three main Miraculous users under the same household. Again, so that's the first thing. But that raises the question, then who's the main villain, right? Who's the main antagonist? Is it even a Hawkmoth-like character? If so, who's it going to be? I feel like Hawkmoth as a concept for a character, right, who uses the, Butterfly Miraculous to take advantage of negative emotions, to bait out Ladybug and Cat Noir, to get their Miraculous, to perform some kind of wish. I feel like that's fine. To me, that's fine, and I see no reason to change that. So Hawkmoth as kind of a concept, or just a character as a whole, even if he's not Gabriel, I still feel like we keep, right? Because it works and it makes sense. As for who he is specifically, I feel like what would be interesting is if he were another student in school, right? Or just in their school, or school in general, right? I feel like the thing with that is, granted, as for what they would use the wish for, maybe they had a loss in their life too and they want to use it the same way. Maybe there's some sort of different way to use it. Granted, we would need to also rewrite how they even come across or possess the butterfly and, Peacock Miraculous to begin with. So that would need to be rewritten. But again, that is something I'll go more in detail if I make supplementary videos based off of these character changes, right? But at the very least, in kind of, wrapping this up, similar to just replacing, Marinette with Bridget and replacing Adrian with Felix, we need to replace Gabriel, we need to replace Hawkmoth with someone other than Gabriel, because I just feel like there's too much. And again, I feel like it would bring some, potentially, it would bring some more interesting things that could be brought out as a result, right? Like there could be some interesting ideas or concepts to come from that. So with that, kind of the last, I guess, for characters, right, is kind of going based off what I said for the Miraculous, limit the supporting cast, right? So Alia, Nino, Chloe, and Master Fu, kind of the bare minimum. So whoever wields Miraculous are obviously going to be part of this new show. But as for everyone else, I feel like they should kind of remain side characters, and the focus should really be on the core 5, 6, 7 characters that we see. It should be basically, the show should pretty much entirely revolve around these Miraculous users, right? With kind of all other characters acting as side characters, right? Again, now am I saying completely get rid of them? No. But I feel like the focus in what kind of, diminished in season 4 was because, again, because if everyone's superpowered, no one is, right? And because you give out so many Miraculous, the ones that do have them hold less meaning, right? I feel like, again, in what may potentially happen and what we see post season 5 is people get Miraculous to permanently keep. I feel like maybe that could be worked into a plot point or storyline in this potential rewrite. But it is something where for those characters and those Miraculous, at the very least, the focus should be on who wields them and those characters specifically, and limiting any other type of supporting cast. Granted, maybe Master Fu still leaves the show in a similar way. Maybe, Natalie exists and is the one who not originally, but who uses that Peacock Miraculous, right? Again, it probably wouldn't be, because at the end of the day, I don't think, again, I'm not going to keep Gabriel's Hawkmoth in this rewrite, because I simply think there's, again, it's something to where I think that I just think it's too much at that point, and it's something to where there's more potential, for not only Gabriel's character, but also, whoever would replace him as Hawkmoth, right? If it were, a student at that school, right? That's kind of what I'm thinking about. Granted, how that would play out, who knows? But, again, maybe, what I'd probably do is I would headcanon the students as slightly older. So, rather than be kind of, early high school, they'd be, late high school, maybe even, college prep or something like that. So they'd be closer to, ages, 17, 18, 19. That way there's more, I guess, understanding or behind their decisions. But, again, with that, right, who knows? We'll see. And I think that ends this video. Again, this is kind of just... This might be the first of many videos. I don't know. I might not even upload this. We'll need to see. Again, the big thing is, we're at a point to where... Basically, we're at a point in the show, in just as a concept, right, to where it's appropriate to kind of now bring this idea up of, all right, and with kind of all these videos I made, it's something now to where I can really kind of visit this topic of, all right, if I were to rewrite the series, basically changing anything besides the idea or concept of the show, what would that look like? Again, in this one, we went through just the topics as a whole, but only really kind of semi-touched on just how the Miraculous would work, as well as the characters. Didn't go over story or plot, didn't go super in-depth to Miraculous and characters, much less, timeline events and show progression, where I'm basically just writing episodes at that point. Again, if I were to do another video, I'd probably go into the story and plot. Maybe I go more in depth to the characters and motives, because I do need to basically create an entirely new character for Hawkmoth. That's going to be the biggest thing, which, again, is something I stand by. I feel like, again, Gabriel, I don't want to say Gabriel shouldn't have been Hawkmoth, but I feel like there is just kind of more potential and less, complications if it's someone else. And basically, the big thing I would need to do to kind of figure out any potential story or plot for this show is, again, basically write that character of who would replace Gabriel's Hawkmoth. But that'll be for another time. Again, I'm just going to end this here, and I don't know how in-depth I'm going to go in this, series or, for this set of videos, but I guess we'll see, right? We'll see. Maybe I make, a few more videos. Maybe I actually commit to basically rewriting the entire series. If I were, it would be, I'm not going to lie, it wouldn't be more than 3 seasons of 12. I ain't writing, 100, it'd be 36 episodes tops, with likely, focusing on a few episodes each season. But again, with that, I don't really have much else to say or do. That's kind of all I've got for this one. So, yep, that's it for this one. See you in the next one.